energy transition and security, which is the focus of our next panel. And when you consider that just barely 4 months ago at the last COP meeting in Glasgow, the focus was on how to transition to greener energy and to reduce hydrocarbons from our energy mix. That was the leitmotif. Today, it seems to be how do we increase natural gas and oil output to stabilize markets. So when you consider that, you consider just how intertwined and interdependent our world is, but also how very, very whimsical it can be as well. To maybe counter my claims, it is my pleasure to invite to the stage our panelists, His Excellency Saad Sharida Al-Kaabi, the Minister of State for Energy Affairs and President and CEO of Qatar Energy. Patrick Pouyanné, Chairman and CEO of Total Energies. Amos Hochstein, Senior Advisor for Energy Security at the US State Department. Anders Opedal, President and CEO of Equinor, and Hadley Gamble of CNBC, who will be moderating this session.
Good afternoon, everybody. Once again, my name is Hadley Gamble. I am CNBC's Chief International Correspondent and anchor based in Abu Dhabi. Energy is one of the many things that I have the privilege of covering, everywhere from Moscow to Dubai to right here in Doha, and certainly over the weekend in Belgium as well, where we saw this historic agreement between the United States and EU partners to attempt to create a situation where they are able, they hope in the short to medium term, to wean themselves off of Russian gas. I want to welcome to the stage our panelists, His Excellency Saad Al-Kaabi. He is, of course, the Minister of Energy Affairs and the President and CEO of Qatar Energy. Patrick Pouyanné, the Chairman and CEO of Total Energies. And Anders Opedal, the President and CEO of Equinor. Gentlemen, welcome, and thank you so much to the Doha Forum for having us all. I want to kick off with His Excellency, and just to get a sense from you in terms of the mechanics, the market dynamics of what we're seeing, because as I mentioned, the United States, the EU partners have decided on a historic agreement. We're talking about 15 billion cubic meters of natural gas, liquefied natural gas, LNG, to Europe in order to wean them from Russian gas. Can you just give us a sense, sir, of how much of that number is going to be made up of supplies from Qatar?
First, I'd like to thank the organizers for such a great conference, and we've heard some great discussions here, and a pleasure to be with such a distinguished panel and yourself after such a long time of being online, most of us, I guess. I think, 15 billion cubic feet a day is quite a large number, and I think to actually accomplish that, you need many players around the world. Qatar is one of the players, one of the major suppliers of LNG to the world, and definitely we have been planning to actually supply Europe for some time. We bought capacity in Zeebrugge terminal, in Montois, in France, Isle of Grain in the UK. We own a terminal or partially own a terminal in Italy, in Rovigo. We own a terminal in the UK, South Hook, with our colleagues Total. So we've been working on bringing more volume into Europe, whether it's the terminal capacity, in addition to announcing that we're going to go from 77 million tons to 126 million tons from Qatar, in addition to a project that we're working on from the US, which will bring 60 million tons, destined really for Europe, because that's the destination that we intended it for, that will be online by 2024-25. So a lot of volume will be coming, but 15 billion needs many more players to be part of that.
Yeah. When I spoke with your foreign minister just a few moments ago, I asked him about this specifically, and he essentially said, we have long-term contracts and we have commitments to be a seller of energy and a producer of energy that is consistent to those needs of our customers. But when you think about this a bit more broadly, do you believe that the state of emergency that we see today in Europe is such that you could potentially attempt to move those contracts or change them?
You see, there are two things. One was your question about the commitment of weaning down or coming off some of the supplies and bringing new 15 billion cubic feet a day. So that's a fresh production or fresh volume, if you will, coming into the US. So my answer was really tuned towards that. If your question now, I believe you said that you're talking about today, what can Qatar do? So as far as today is concerned, the majority of our volume is already destined to certain markets, including Europe, I mean, where it's long-term, non-divertible volume, like in Italy and some other destinations. But the majority is going, probably 85% is going to Asia. The ones that are actually, the volumes that are going to to Europe, like most of the sellers to Europe, are volumes that go to hub, based pricing, and these are divertible volumes. So what we've committed as Qatar is that during this situation with Ukraine, we're not going to divert away from Europe, although we have the contractual right to do that. So that volume is quite small in comparison to the needs of the 15. And I think even the Europeans and the discussion with the Americans on what they said they would do, it would take probably another 7 years to achieve that, or 5 to 7 years, I think is what they talked about. It won't be something that's immediate. But immediately, I don't think we can help, and nobody can replace. I've said this very clearly. The volume that we're talking about, 30 to 40% of gas coming from Russia to Europe, is not something that can be replaced overnight. It needs time. But it also needs the international companies such as Total and Shell and Exxon and Equinor to have their governments or the European governments be a promoter of oil and gas companies investing, not demonizing oil and gas companies, as has been the case the last few years.
Patrick, I'd love to weigh in with you on this one, because when we think about what we've heard over the last 24 hours from Europe, I attended that meeting. I finally had to leave because it went on for hours and hours, because there's such a disagreement between various nations about what should be done in an attempt to wean Europe from Russian gas. But I want to ask you about this idea of the collective buying power of Europe. What do you see that means for pricing? Because the entire idea of this is that they could get a better price from producers.
I think the basic idea is, in fact, the way the European market is working, it's a spot market. It's a strange, we are a continent with a deficit. We import. Norway is one of the producers, but we import. And today we have decided to be in a spot-free market, a hub, like His Excellency was saying, and with little storage and not enough regas capacities. That's the problem we face today. I think the idea is maybe we should move to longer-term contracts, long-term contracts. And you know that the Commission, in particular the antitrust body, was against, because we were afraid that some long-term contract could advantage some industrials from Germany against industrials. So that's the key issue. What I said to the French authorities, if you want to stabilize the gas price, you need to accept somewhere. First, you need to have more storage. Second, more regas terminals, more access to the continent because you have a deficit. And third, do like they've done in Asia, in Japan, in China today, where you have some long-term contracts. Of course, it's national companies that Saad is facing. It's not private companies. But you need to have some long-term contracts, which will obviously, when I'm signing a long-term contract, I'm accepting to have a sort of floor, a sort of ceiling, and so the price is not the same than going on the spot market. So this is a way to stabilize. And I think the idea to do it all together, I just want to understand who will sign the contract. Is it the EU Commission? Where is the commercial capacity? We've done that for vaccines, so it's not impossible. But I think it's the idea that I know that the German minister came here and the others were not very happy to see that each country, I think, in fact, today we are in a war. So if we want to find a solution, we should be together and not trying to be selfish, I think. But for me, the fundamental idea is long-term. Let's accept to inject long-term, which suppose, and back to I was listening to John Kerry, that Europe accept to consider gas as a long-term transition fuel. Because if they told us, you invest, you sign a 20-year contract with Qatar, but maybe in 10 years we will tell you that we don't need the gas, I'm not a philanthropy business, It was the famous expression of Minister Al-Attiyah in the past, but it's not my job, So we have to reconcile the security of supply, the pricing, and the climate. And I think this is, for me, an historic period where suddenly we've seen were mainly driven by climate in the last 5 years for fundamental reason. But sometimes we forget that energy is a triangle. Security of supply, pricing, and climate. And we must find the right balance, and I'm convinced this is a strategy of TotalEnergies that gas is part of this transition because it gives a flexibility to move from coal to renewable, to a full decarbonized energy system. But that's the fundamental question. If you want to attract investors, you need to give them a future. In energy, we work on 15 and 20 years, horizon.
So that EU planning that we got after several hours of their meeting was essentially, in your view, big on ideas but short on detail.
Exactly. So, and in energy business, as we speak about billions of euros, the details are much more important sometimes than the concept, But why not? Let's work now, and I'm ready. I mean, TotalEnergies is a large corporate company. We control 40% of the access of regas terminals in Europe. We've said, I think together we have almost a big share of it. No, but I mean, so we are a big player, largest exporter for energy from the US, by the way. We have a large food forward for this, so I'm ready to work on it to find the solution. We are a European company and we exchange with the European authorities, but now we need to work and to know, by the way, who will be the counterpart. We need to know to who will speak, Do I speak to the French government, to the European Commission? That will be. But let's work.
Anders, I want to ask you specifically about what we were just hearing from America's climate envoy, John Kerry. He was talking about not just the crisis in Ukraine, but also the crisis of climate. For you as a producer and one who is very heavily involved in renewables, how damaging is the Russia-Ukraine crisis to the transition to clean energy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And first of all, thank you very much for being invited to Doha. I really appreciate coming down here and being a part of such a panel. Let me just start, where Mr. Poirier mentioned, the triangle that we need to solve. And basically, we have been going from crisis and crisis in terms of the debate recently. 9 months ago, we talked about Code Red and the IPCC report and kind of no more exploration wells to be drilled, no more producing fields. And then we're starting to see the supply crunch for gas in Europe, and everyone started to talk about pricing and affordability. And now it's about energy security. I think the triangle, the trilemma that Patrick mentioned here is really what we need to look at in the long term. How can we be able to provide affordable energy, increase the renewable energy, and we are, in offshore wind, we are in solar, and how can we also kind of decarbonize both the upstream oil and gas, but also help our customers to decarbonize how they use our energy. And if we are able to think long-term on these elements, although we have a very volatile market at the moment, I think we are able to kind of do what the Secretary Kerry said in his speech. But of course, we are in a war situation now. So now it's about finding some of the short-term solutions to ensure that people get the energy. And particularly, it's important to ensure that we are not moving from an energy crisis into a food crisis.
And frankly, inflation and a crisis of confidence. We're seeing that already in Europe. We're seeing that elsewhere. I want to ask Your Excellency how you see this crisis with Ukraine and Russia accelerating the move to alternative formats of payment for energy, not just gas, but also oil. We saw a report in the Wall Street Journal last week that Saudi Arabia could potentially be considering oil contracts based in yuan. We heard from the Russian president demanding that anybody who would buy Russian energy should pay in Russian rubles. Do you anticipate that this crisis is accelerating the move to alternative forms of payment, potentially even cryptocurrency?
I think this is a reaction based on a war situation, and I don't think you can base a long-term plan and mechanism of how the oil and gas business and the financial sector attached to that works with the short-term events. So I think this is just something that's happening as a reaction, but I don't think it will change the long-term way that we have been dealing and we will be dealing in the future. So I don't think it will fundamentally change the way we have been doing it. But I think if I can just elaborate on something my colleague here and friend Patrick said regarding the stark difference between dealing with Europe and dealing with Asia. I've talked to many, as you know, many politicians have been knocking the door of Qatar in this crisis, and it's exactly what Patrick said, is in Asia you're dealing with either government-owned companies or government-controlled companies, whereas in the entire Europe, really, you're just dealing with governments that are telling, they were just a few months ago telling companies, you're bad boys and we don't want you, and oil and gas is bad, and now they're asking them to go and buy products and bring on more products. So fundamentally, the price shift that has happened, it's 5 years of lack of investments in oil and gas that has caused the spike and that people are complaining about in oil prices and gas prices. And then Ukraine issue, of course, amplified that.
Patrick, I want to ask you specifically, you mentioned infrastructure and the long-term projects that are going to have to be built out for years in order to reach the capacity that's needed. When I spoke with Olaf Scholz last week, the Chancellor of Germany, he basically said to me that before we can even talk about Russian energy sanctions from Europe, he's got to get LNG terminals built in Germany. They have no way to bring that LNG into the country at this point. When you take a step back and think about the prices we're seeing of energy in Europe, given the amount of infrastructure that they're going to have to put in place, when can we expect energy prices, in your view, to begin to go back to more acceptable levels?
First, we need to stop to have the debate. Because today this debate about the Russian gas, do we keep it, don't we keep it, is just pushing every day the price up. So my advice to our government was, okay, you decide, either you keep it or you don't keep it. My first comment. Having said that, it is also very clear to me that the gas price in Europe will be higher tomorrow than it was yesterday, because yesterday this Russian gas was giving us a base of 30–40% of low-cost gas in Europe. So Europe was benefiting from the Russian gas, let's be clear, compared to LNG. LNG, from the US to Europe, it started from its landing in Europe at minimum at $7 per million BTU. It's just a question of chain. So Russian gas is produced at 1 and 2. So obviously, so now this time will be over, because I'm convinced whatever will happen, we'll get rid of the Russian gas. Not today, it will take 2, 3, 4 years to build the infrastructure, then to find the LNG, because you don't build a new LNG plant on the planet. You can ask Saad, he's an expert of it, it takes 5 years. So we don't have, so even if we decide today, new supply will have to be built. But the consequence of all that is that clearly the gas price in Europe will be higher than it was. So the $5 that we experienced, or the free $5, I think game is over. We'll go above 10. Today we are nowhere. We are at $30 per million BTU, which is much too high. But as you said, it's a crisis. It was, but fundamentally, we will manage to get the price back if we accept that gas is part of the European mix. Otherwise, again, the investors will be prudent, and we will have always a problem of demand and supply. This is what is happening today. There is a debate. I was listening to John Kerry. Yes, we need to build a new decarbonized system. It's $300. It will take years. But the mistake we are doing altogether is that we want at the same time to destroy the energy of today, not to invest enough in oil and gas. We cannot do that for the next 10, 15 years. We must heavily invest in renewables, in hydrogen, in all these new molecules, yes. But at the same time, we must maintain the system, because our life today is done of oil and gas. And so what we've done in the last 5 years, because of crisis, we invested not enough. The price went up. The war is just adding on it. So if we want to be serious, if we want to put back the gas price in Europe, it's a matter, again, of long-term policy. Do we accept, to get all together in Europe, that gas is a transition fuel, and that we will need it for the next 20, 25 years? Then investors will come, and you will see price will go back, will go down. But you know, I'm excited because for me, I'm the number two. Not I would say number three because number one is just beside me. Number two among the private oil and gas company in LNG business. We have 10% of the world market. A new market is open to us. It's called Europe. We know so the world can change. So we are lucky today, you know. We have some issues with some of our plants, but we've seen this new market. But it will be, LNG is fundamentally more expensive than pipe gas.
Yeah.
So the one who will win is on my left.
Patrick, I want to ask you, though, to walk us through something. So Total Energies at this point has said that you are working towards a gradual suspension of activities in Russia. I want you to take this moment to clarify the mechanics of all of this, because essentially what we've seen is your competitors having written off their Russian investments, and I'm talking to the tune of billions of dollars. I'm talking about BP, I'm talking about Shell. Are you prepared to say that the business that you still have in Russia is worthless?
I mean, written off does not mean that you leave a country. Written off is just a decision in your account to say these assets are worth nothing. We do not consider, today they're worth nothing, because today they have no buyer, for sure. But you know, when you have, like me, $13 billion of assets, I have a duty with my shareholders to take care of the future of these assets. So clearly, what we said, and we are totally committed, we apply all the sanctions, we will not put a single new capital in Russia. The question for us is, what do we do with the existing assets? And these ones, I'm not ready to give them for zero to Russian people, to Russian oligarchs, or to Russian, because by the way, it will be the contrary of the sanctions.
But does that mean you consider working with President Putin in the future?
No way.
A man that is
considered
by the US president to be
No. I just told you that we'll do what I just say. It's not a matter of, no, we don't work with President Putin. I don't think that's clear. But make a difference, please, between Russia and President Putin. I think you have a Russian population today which will suffer as well from the sanction. But again, for me, it's a question of accountability and responsibility vis-à-vis our shareholders and stakeholders. These assets are there. I will not give them for free to Mr. Putin. Because this is what it means, living today. I'm giving my shares, I'm giving my plans. They will be super happy, my Russian partners, you know?
So you think BP and Shell made a mistake?
They do what they want, I'm doing what they want, you know? Each person does what they want. I not comment.
Isn't there a worry to
But I don't know why would you say that they are right and we are wrong. It's not a question, for me, it's
because the Russians are slaughtering people in Ukraine.
But again, it's what is the link between the existing plants? The plants which are there are there. Let's be clear, we don't operate the plants. We have financed the plants. We are not there. They are operated by a Russian company, which can do it without us. So this plant will continue to produce, whatever I'm deciding. So it will continue to produce. I have, by the way, a long-term contract with this plant. The only way for Total Energies to exit of long-term contracts is to have the sanction from Europe, to use force majeure. This is a reality. And this is a reality for my colleagues, by the way. You can ask to one of my peers if he still operates the LNG contracts on Sakhalin. It's still there. The contract is there. So it changes nothing of the decision. The question is, and by the way, you can write off, I'm not sure my colleagues have managed to find a way to exit. You want me tomorrow to sell for nothing to Russia or to Chinese interests? This is what you want me to do? I mean, so I understand perfectly, and I can tell you the ethics part of OPEC, and we are absolutely against, and we firmly condemn the aggression of Russia against Ukraine. I have people in Ukraine, I take care of them. I have also people in Russia. But then there is a point where, again, the question is for us, how can we really dismantle the system without being accused in few months or year that we have just given that for nothing to Russian interests, which we are supposed to sanction. And I would like somebody to explain me how I'm doing it, and I would like my colleagues to explain me how they will do it. So again, the question of written off, you know, is just putting that in an exceptional results. It means nothing. The question is, what will be the consequence? Today, it changed. Again, these plants will continue to be run. This production will continue whatever we decide. So this is the most important. So I know the debate at this stage, and we also take actions. By the way, I'm not sure that many of my peers have announced what I've done Tuesday, that we don't purchase any more oil and diesel from Russia from the end of the year. I've never seen somebody say that and doing it.
So just to confirm, you would not do business with Vladimir Putin again?
No, it's clear.
Anders, I want to bring you in on this as well, because obviously you made the decision to divest, to get out of Russia, as so many other oil and gas companies have decided. Do you think that Patrick and Total Energies and potentially even the president of France, who refused to answer my question about that this week, could potentially be on the wrong side of history as a result of these decisions?
That is not up to me to decide. You know, when the war in Ukraine started, we saw we couldn't be in Russia anymore, and we announced that we're starting the process to exit on our four JVs. We have made humanitarian help to the Ukrainian people, particularly the refugees, through the Norwegian refugee kind of associations that helping with it. We have started the process, same as other companies. We stopped buying more oil after the decision, and now we're working to exit.
Your Excellency, at the start of this crisis, we were already talking, obviously, about an energy crisis that was occurring as a result of years of lack of investment, underinvestment, if you will. And when Washington called Qatar, made the call, you answered the call in terms of committing to doing whatever was possible to help alleviate this crisis. But I want to ask you about your fellow GCC nations. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Obviously, these are major oil producers. I'm talking about OPEC, the folks who lead OPEC. They haven't taken a call from Washington. And even though their remit is supposedly to stabilize energy prices, to stabilize the market, I should say, and we saw them doing that during the pandemic, higher prices have not convinced them to make a move, at least not so far. Do you worry about demand destruction? Do you worry about inflation, about what this is actually going to do longer term to the global economy?
I will attempt to answer part of your question because, I mean, the calls from the US to these countries, I'm not privy to, so I can't comment on them. But for us, I mean, we're clear about trying to support the Europeans, and the Americans have called us, the Europeans have called us on trying to support, and we have said that the volumes that are divertible away from Europe, even if we can get higher prices for them, we would not divert in solidarity with Europe. So that's very clear. Now, regarding the oil price, I'm not trying to defend the OPEC decision, but I would like you just to look at the numbers. And I think first, probably starting 2015, you saw about a 20% annual decrease in capital expenditure in the oil and gas. And there are two elements to this. People see oil and gas as, opening the valve and closing the valve of production, and you can just bring production up and down. There are two investments. One is investment to just keep the production that you have going. So just to keep, if you're producing 1 million barrels a day, to keep it up and running, you need heavy capital investment in drilling and maintenance and so on. So that has really come down as far as keeping up the current production. Second is bringing new production did not come into the industry, and this is across the board, oil and gas overall worldwide. And then on top of that, you started the pre-COP26 discussion of transition, where there was a lot of attack on oil and gas companies, and you had boards being attacked and so on. And then you saw that 20% annually, and then the COVID hit. So with the COVID, 35% reduction year on year in capex. So really, it's a really, I'd say, a cumulative effect of 6 to 7 years of lack of real capital expenditure that was needed in the oil and gas sector that has caused the shortage and the spike that you're talking about. Now, if I go to the OPEC side, they announce the production of every country that's in OPEC plus, as they call them now, or the two groups. And if you see, with the exception of one or two countries, month on month, they've agreed to something that I think is very sensible, 400,000 barrels a day of increase, which is quite reasonable, not to shock the market, if you will. This is all pre-Ukraine issue. And I think it was very sensible what they were doing, but the lack of investment coupled with, if you look at the list of the countries, only two countries, I believe, and maybe one now, that has no capacity, and all of them, with no exception, cannot reach their quota. What does this tell you? It tells you there isn't supply that's available for them to put on the market. If I have supply that's available and I am below my limit in OPEC, and the price of oil is 120, you think I'll stop production? So it's fundamentally an issue of lack of supply that's causing this, and it's not the action of OPEC, in my view, or OPEC plus. I'm not defending them, I'm not part of that group, but I'm just saying these are numbers and these are facts, and numbers don't lie.
Patrick, what about the policymakers in Europe? Because we discussed that a little bit earlier, the policymakers in Europe, and the fundamental disconnect there seems to be between people who understand energy markets and people who don't, and oftentimes the don't are the people that are making the policies, particularly in Europe.
So, you know, I spent quite a lot of time in the recent 3 weeks with the policymakers, the leaders, because they came to us to ask us questions, to give them, for example, the gas markets. Can we get rid or not of Russian gas? There was different positions. No, we managed to reconcile. It's true that energy is a complex matter because everything is interconnected. What's puzzled me is that when I see policymakers, you know, they think we can have a policy in renewable, a policy in gas, a policy on oil, a policy on nuclear, as if all that was not interconnected. In fact, there is one energy which interconnects, it's electricity. And climate change is a matter of molecules and electrons. We will have more and more electricity. And if you want to have a policy which does not integrate, you know, the European leaders have discovered when the gas price is going up, electricity price is going up. Of course, the market is just using the marginal cost. And the marginal cost of electricity in Europe is a CCGT plus CO2. But that is discovered today. And honestly, it's not an easy matter to understand the interconnection. And by the way, this is why we become Total Energies. We move fundamentally from Total oil to Total Energies, including electricity in our portfolio, because we strongly believe that the company will be an energy company, like John Kerry said, which manage oil, gas, and electricity, will be able to derive a lot of value of this interconnection in the market. So that's the complexity. So today, what I'm happy, you know, this week I can reveal you, I spent 1 hour with 4 CEOs of oil and gas company, with 2 hours with Mrs. van der Leyen, asking us questions about before the council, and even the French president called me during you know, so, I mean, it's good. So, but, you know, we need to make, I think it's really the problem. This energy policy, again, needs to integrate security of supply, climate, and all the energies together. And so the mistake, like I said, is to oppose the energies. To say oil and gas is bad, renewable is good. No, we need to put all that together, and we know that fundamentally we want to go to a system, decarbonized system, with no oil and gas. But it will take time. I was listening, CCS is not bad. A net zero world will require CCS in 2050. This is a famous net zero IEA scenario. So we must face the reality. And what I hope from this crisis is having policymakers facing the reality and then working together to find sensible solution. A transition is very complex to manage, but we need the management of the transition, not just axiom, you know. This is good, this is bad. No, it does not work like that.
You said that they came to you this week to ask those questions, Patrick. Do you think that if they'd asked you about energy a little while earlier on, we would be in the mess that we're in now?
I think I would have clearly recommended to them to build some regas terminals in Europe for long and to have gas storage. Because for me, it's obvious, you know. I mean, I think, you know, the famous 2 German terminals, I think I heard about them since I am in Visin 20 years ago. And why didn't we build them? Because there was no visibility, you know? And so I think, yes, we would have probably proposed them to do things. But, you know, at the end, and it's a lesson, by the way, because energy cannot work only on market forces. Because this is what Europe wanted to do, to have a pure market, liberalized market. Unfortunately, you need to have some planning in the system. So you need to have, yes, market forces, but also some sound policies.
I think if I can just say that a while back, if they asked him, they would still listen, they would still hear the story from him. I don't think they would listen. Now they are listening. That's the difference between before and now. So one thing I wanted, since we're in Qatar here, and you talked about the transition, and Secretary Kerry was here. I'd like to just maybe showcase Qatar a little bit in that area, because we've done great work that hasn't been really talked about much. We're a big gas country, of course. We've been working on carbon capture and sequestration since 2008. In 2015, we started the largest CO2 capture and sequestration in the MENA region. We currently, as we speak, anybody could drive 80 kilometers north and visit our carbon capture and sequestration site. We're actually capturing 2.5 million tons per annum of CO2 and sequestering it underground. By the time we have all our expansions in place by 2035, we have a plan till 2035. The expansions will come in 26 to reach 11 million tons of CO2 sequestration. Before the World Cup, hopefully in October, we'll be inaugurating the largest single solar power plant in the center of the country, in the middle of the country, in an area called Al Kharsa'a, which will power, and Total are partners with us in that project also, and that's a solar power plant that will power up to 10% of the country's national grid. And being the largest gas producer and having that, it demonstrates that we're serious about the transition. You can achieve the transition, but you need to do it sensibly. And as Patrick said it very well, you need all the solutions to be working together. And today we're going to be announcing, I shook hands with Secretary Kerry. Qatar is also joining the methane pledge with Secretary Kerry. The reason we didn't actually join it earlier is because we started in 2015. From 15 to 20, the pledge says 30% reduction. We reduced methane, fugitive methane, by 75% from 2015 till 2020. So we're way ahead in that regard. But now we have to do more from now till 2030. So I just wanted to showcase what we've been doing here. So.
Yeah, I just want to also to bring in that we all share the same goal. We all want to get to net zero. We have the energy trilemma we need to solve together. But also, how do we do that? And I think sometimes we are focusing on setting new targets. We have climate targets. We have no energy security targets. And also someone would like to set price targets as well. But what we really need to do is to make sure that the collaboration between industry, between governments, between consumers, investors actually take place. We see now a more deglobalized world. And, if we want to scale up renewables, we need minerals, we need metal from different parts of the world. And that's equally important. If we don't want a food crisis, we also need kind of a globalized world where trade is actually moving freely, such that we can make the fertilizers and so to have the farmland growing, and then technology. 50% of the technology needed to do and come to net zero is not yet developed and implemented. And that's a hard task we're going to do going forward. Here also collaboration is important. And my last point, industrialization. Oil and gas and coal is a massive industry, and we're going to replace that. That will require massive investment, but a massive creation of new industry jobs. And it's a big, big task, and we can only do it if we are able to create peace in the world and collaboration and nations talking to others and not fighting.
Speaking of peace in the world, just before we wrap it up, when I spoke with Vladimir Putin in October of last year, I asked him the question on everyone's mind at that time, which was, are you using energy as a weapon? And I posed that to you gentlemen today in the sense that it is clear that amongst many of his weapons, Vladimir Putin was also using energy to damage the West, and frankly, now we see the global economy. Do you believe that his strategy has been successful? Everybody.
I'm not sure I've understood the question. You know, by the way, in this story there is a supplier, Russia, there is a customer, Europe. So the question, if he did not force us as well to take his gas, that's true that we created a situation where we are dependent on them. Why? Because it was a low-cost gas. So it's a lesson for all of us. And again, why? Because in fact, the more I'm looking to my triangle, you know what dominates the triangle? It is a price. Energy is a fundamental mean of our economy and of life. And today, why do we have crisis in Europe with all the people? Because gasoline is high, gas is high, electricity is high, because we damage their purchasing power. And so I think our society, for long, and particularly in Europe, where our major fight was against inflation, we favored the lowest cost energy, which is just what is happening around the planet. We begin to impact that with climate, and now energy security of supply has a cost. And the real question which is asked to us, how much are we ready to pay for the cost of energy security without Russia? So, yes, we created a sort of monster, but on both sides, you know. And I think, I attended the meeting where you were invited.
I know you did.
Yeah, and I will tell you, for me that day, I remarked, which I was very puzzled, Vladimir Putin knew everything about the European gas market. And I had over experience. It was the first time that I discovered that. So I think, yes, probably, he learned a lot and he discovered that this relationship could be used for, I would say, these Machiavelli plans that we, unfortunately, are all facing today. But we have a lot of lessons to be driven from that on many issues, but it has a cost. And climate will have a cost, security will have a cost. And so how do we, policymakers, convince people to accept to pay for these two costs? That's for me, I'm not a political leader. I'm just taking care of my company. My duty is to find the best fields in the world, the best plants in the world, to produce at the lowest cost possible. And this is why I'm in love with Saad and Qatar, because this takes place here, you know?
You heard it here first. Gentlemen, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much to the audience.